Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Charles Darwin University's Casuarina campus. And to those of you joining us online this evening for the CDU Voice Parliament Student Debate. This is the second in a series of 3 events to provide information about the upcoming Australian referendum on an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice to Parliament. I acknowledge that we are gathered here today on Larrakia land, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. I also acknowledge my people, the Gurrangarang people. I acknowledge my family and the passion for education they have instilled in me. That passion for education has given me my voice. I thank the Larrakia for hosting my family on their land. My name is David Orr. I am the Director of International Engagement for the Northern Territory Government's Department of Industry, Tourism and Trade. I am a former diplomat and lawyer, and that is, I'm understood the reason why I've been asked to come here today. That somehow gives me credentials to moderate a debate. We'll soon see. Before we go over anything further, a few housekeeping items. For those joining us here on campus, the emergency exits are through the 2 doors either side of us, and the doors at the back of the room. Toilets are located through the back door on your right, down the stairs, and then towards the back area of the foyer. Please take a moment to switch your phones to silent. And importantly, please be aware that this afternoon's student debate is being live streamed to an online audience and recorded for later broadcast. You may be filmed and photographed during this public lecture. A link to the recording will be made available via the CDU website on our dedicated Voice to Parliament webpage. Tonight, I acknowledge our special guests here in the room. His Honour Acting Justice Graham Hiley, RFD, Charles Darwin University's Vice Chancellor and President, Professor Scott Bowman, AO. I also acknowledge other First Nations people from other nations that are here tonight, all of our other distinguished guests, both here in person and online. I welcome you all to this evening's student debate. It now gives me pleasure to invite CDU's Larrakia Academic in Residence, Auntie Billawarra Lee, to the stage to welcome us to Larrakia land.
Vice Chancellor, Mrs. Bowman, Your Honour. Darandara Demogwa Bachua, Nayana, Gudaminba Billawarra Lee, Damreligi Tukula Merijan, Yujana Bachuana. So good evening, everyone. It is good to be here with you all. Malinma Bachua, to those that have joined us via the technology songlines. My name is Dr. Billawarra Lee, but I'm really happy for you to call me Auntie B. I am a senior elder of the Larrakia Nation, the Larrakia Academic in Residence for Charles Darwin University, and a director member on the Larrakia Nation board. Importantly, I am a senior member of the very large local Kabillo family, one of the 8 family groups that make up the Larrakia Nation, and my name Billawarra in Larrakia means red-tailed black cockatoo. I am really very happy to welcome you to Gullamerijan, Larrakia country, and I want to thank you all for the respect you show us, the traditional custodians of the land we gather on today. And although our lands extend up to 50 kilometres inland, we are saltwater people. Welcoming visitors to my land is really important. It allows me to introduce you to my ancestors, our mother the earth and her sister Mother Nature, and I can ask them to keep you safe while you are here. I acknowledge other elders that are here today, and to my brothers and sisters and non-binary people from other First Nations. A very warm welcome from my heart. I know the dreaming still runs strong in our mind, body and spirits. The Larrakia people are the first sovereign nation of the mainland and the islands and waters of the Greater Darwin region. Our sovereignty has never been ceded or extinguished. As the Australian First Nation peoples, we are the oldest continuous surviving civilization on Earth. Our civilizations are older than all the other acknowledged ancient civilizations on this planet, including the Mesopotamian and the ancient Chinese, Greek, Indian, and Egyptians. One day I hope that Australia, if not the world, celebrates this enduring, deep, rich history, and they understand and learn from our ancient wisdoms. Because remember, our history is your history. I send my love and best wishes to our future leaders who come behind us. I ask the ancestors to grant you strength, resilience, and wisdom for your future journey. So it is on that note, it is my privilege on behalf of my elders, past and present, to welcome you all to Kuyawaranyiki, our land. Welcome to my saltwater home of great food, friendly people, beautiful beaches, spectacular sunsets, and the most amazing lightning storms. Because you are walking on Larrakia land, and when you leave, our message will stay with you. So I hope your stay in my country is a safe and nourishing one, and that the spirits of my ancestors watch over you while you are here. All that I ask in return is that you walk softly on Mother Earth and treat her with love and respect, as the Larrakia people do. And in these really difficult times, Milama Damra, be well. Mamik Bachiwa, see you later. Thank you.
Thought you were going to introduce me. Anyway, Dr. Billawarra Lee, thank you very much for that welcome to your beautiful country. If David had have introduced me, he would have introduced me as Scott Bowman, the Vice-Chancellor of the university, Charles Darwin University. Can I start by thanking you for that wonderful welcome to your country, Larrakia country, and say how fantastic it is that our university is based on your country, and to say that this is really a university that belongs to everyone, particularly Larrakia people, because we are on your country. And I do address you as Doctor, although it's not up there anymore. Auntie Billawarra Lee was given a doctorate from the university just a few weeks ago. So congratulations on that honour. Yeah, go on, give it someone. And it is the silly season at the moment, the dry season. And I know that Auntie Billawarra has got to nip off to another function. And I know you do many functions every evening at this time of year, so thank you for coming along. Can I thank His Honour Graham Hiley for being here tonight, and it's great to see Sue here as well. It is fantastic that Graham's here. There wouldn't be, I think, a judge anywhere in Australia that has had more dealings with land rights and Aboriginal law in this country. So it's a great privilege to have you here tonight, Graham. Thank you for coming along. And thank you for David for not introducing, sorry, for coming and moderating tonight. I met David in East Timor when he was a diplomat over there, and was a great friend to the university as we start to really ramp up what we're doing in Timor-Leste after the COVID. Now, Auntie Billawarra and I said we've got to be very careful. It's a debate. We've got to really be very careful what we say, not to influence and let people know what we think on this issue. But maybe Auntie B didn't get the memo. So I think most people know that the university has taken a stance, and I'm not going to talk about that tonight for that very reason. But one of the things that we put in our statement is that we knew that not everybody in the university agreed with the yes vote, but we are a university and we are respectful of people that have different views. I really want to thank the students for stepping up this evening. We put out a call. We want to have a debate. We want to hear the student voices. I mean, we often hear the voices of our academics, of our leaders in the university, but universities really are made up of the students. So I thank you for coming along tonight. and sharing your views on this incredibly important issue. Someone said this is a once in a generation issue for Australia. Professor Ruben Bolt, our Deputy Vice Chancellor in First Nations Leadership, said this isn't a once in a generation, it's once in a generations issue that we're going to be dealing with before the end of the year. So this is incredibly important, and I'm pleased that the university is really playing an important role in the debate that is going on across Australia. But welcome to the university. This is your university. It belongs to everybody in the community. And let's enjoy this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bowman. I think I've lost 1 point already. As we prepare to hear from our debaters, please let me explain the format and the roles of the participants tonight. Firstly, all of our students are supportive of the university's approach to providing well-informed and respectful conversation around a voice to Parliament, whether their view be for or against it. One of the fundamentals of debating is that teams are given a side, and it's their role to pursue, to the best of their ability, that position that they've been given. The students tonight may not share their personal views, and please remember that they are debating a topic and a side that they have been given. A university, after all, is a place of free thought, where students need to be critical of mind, and a university must be sure of its purpose. And Professor Bowman has just demonstrated to us in his opening remarks that this university is sure of its purpose. I will read a little bit from CDU's Voice to Parliament website on the university's position. CDU will provide a platform for discussion and the exchange of well-informed ideas and points of view that can be shared, debated, explored in a safe and respectful manner, where we encourage everyone to listen, learn, and ask questions. We understand and respect that not everyone will support this university's stance. We are deeply mindful of the cultural load that people may carry and acknowledge that for some, this may be a difficult personal time. We ask that all conversations are mindful of the impact this topic may have on the people around them. We encourage everyone to undertake this conversation with courage, kindness, leadership, and openness in mind. As I mentioned, my role this evening is that of MC and moderator. I will try to steer the flow of proceedings tonight, introduce the speakers, as well as act as timekeeper and rule keeper to ensure that this debate is kept fair. Our special guest judge, His Honour, Acting Justice Graham Hiley, and he has the distinguished position to pass judgment on tonight's debate, something I'm sure His Honour is well familiar with. By the end of tonight, he will either let us know whether the for the motion or against the motion team has been successful. The motion this evening, a proposed law to alter the Constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Do you approve this proposed alteration? I note, as you probably will, that legislation enabling the Voice to Parliament referendum was successfully passed through the Senate yesterday, 52 votes to 19, yet again demonstrating that there is two sides of the motion. We're going to have a referendum later this year. All Australian citizens will be asked the very same question as the motion being debated tonight. Our speakers will work in two teams of three, one team of three and one team of two. We'll be lucky enough to hear from Patrick twice this evening. One of his team members is unable to make this evening. Now, they will represent arguments for and against the motion and will introduce new arguments, rebut the previous speaker's arguments, and make final conclusions. We'll begin with the yes team, their opening argument, and we'll alternate no, yes, until we finish with our final no speaker. Our last two speakers will have 1 minute extra to sum up their team's arguments for the judge's consideration. I should note there are three very important features of tonight's debate. The speakers tonight are students who are volunteering to take part, to develop their debating skills, to express their passion for a topic, or to bring another point of view to this conversation. All speeches made by the speakers are for information purposes and are not necessarily the opinion or personal view of the speaker. The intention of the debate is to help increase our knowledge about the arguments for voting yes or no in a respectful, safe environment, so we can make an informed decision going into the referendum later this year. We thank and support all speakers tonight and wish them the best of luck. Again, I reiterate to you the last sentence of CDU's statement of support. Whilst we understand that people hold different views, we encourage and welcome discussion and debate that is well-informed, honest and respectful. Whilst there won't be an opportunity for audience questions during this event, we can be assured that our 6 debaters will interrogate the arguments thoroughly. We do, however, also have an interactive element for you in the House and online, so for both audiences, a chance to let our judge know how effective our debaters have been. So for those who are technically minded, if you haven't already done so on your smartphone, you can download an application called Slido. If you can get that QR code, maybe you can hasten the download. Using the Slido app or via the QR code link, we're asking you, the audience, the question on the screen. Simply enter the code on the web browser on your phone or computer for those of you at home, and you'll be able to answer the question. So the question on the screen. You'll be asked this question twice this evening, so at the beginning and at the end of the debate. Do you approve the proposed alteration to the Constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice to Parliament? You'll be asked to vote yes, no, or undecided. If you could please vote now, and again at the end of the debate to share your thoughts on the strength of this evening's debate. So now we move to the question behind this evening, the question that's being debated, the very same one that will be asked to vote later in the year in the referendum. The motion for consideration, a proposed law to alter the Constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Do you approve this proposed alteration? Let's start the debate. Firstly, I'd like to introduce the first of our speakers this evening for the Yes team, Edison Garcia, who is studying a PhD in philosophy with the Faculty of Arts and Society. Please welcome Edison to the stage.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you on TV for your welcome to the country. In April 1997, Richard Trogan was asked by the Council of a Yolngu community to facilitate a meeting between government officers and the community leaders. The topic was the high consumption of sugary drinks and lollies within the community. The interpreter asked the community their thoughts about sugary drinks and lollies. They said they thought it was good food because on TV, they usually watch happy people and healthy kids drinking Coca-Cola and having lollies. Then community leaders were asked if they knew that sugary drinks and sugary food have artificial sweeteners and imitation flavors. At this point, the conversation got broken. Those concepts were so clear for the government officer, but were new for the Yolngu knowledge system. 25 years later, and 2 weeks ago, I was having lunch with a friend. He's from overseas, he's a health worker, and he came to the Northern Territory to work in remote communities. He was very disappointed. He said it was pointless to work in remote communities because people simply didn't show up to their appointments. And even if they show up, they don't follow basic health recommendations, such as stop drinking sugary drinks and eating lollies. I asked him about the communication strategies in place. He said most of his patients doesn't speak English. There are no interpreters in their appointments. And of course, he, my friend, doesn't speak any indigenous language. In Western culture, the negative effects of sugary drinks and lollies are considered as universal knowledge. However, Western culture is not universal. I think not many changes have occurred since what happened 25 years ago in the Yolngu community meeting and what happened to my friend just 2 weeks ago. And I think that both situations show the reasons why we are here today. Why it's important to support an indigenous voice. Miscommunications happen not only when we talk about sugary drinks. It happens in every single aspect of social problems faced by indigenous Australians, especially in remote communities. I think we cannot dismiss other cultural systems because they are unfamiliar for us. And I think we cannot ignore history because it's uncomfortable for us. We cannot deny that the difficult situation faced by the indigenous in Australia are consequences of colonialism. Western society has not denied its responsibility for colonialism. However, it has been always told a story that erases its responsibility for the consequences. Western society says, yes, we commit crimes during colonialism, but we cannot blame new generations. Yes, colonialism was a terrible part of history, but it was a long time ago. We must move on and think of the future. Yes, colonialism happened, and whatever comes after but is what absolves the West of its responsibility. History tells us what happened yesterday, but history tells us the reason for what is happening today and what it could happen tomorrow. Western society has been shaped by Shakespeare of 400 years ago, by the Enlightenment of 300 years ago, by liberal democracy and constitutionalism of 300 years ago. Then we cannot say that what happened just 200 years ago no longer matters. It matters, especially for nations and culture that have lived in this land for over 10,000 years. When I was preparing my arguments for this debate, I read different newspaper headlines with the question of why is an indigenous voice necessary? Let's imagine this headline differently. Imagine if it says, why is a Western voice necessary? It sounds redundant. It's a redundant question because the Australian political system has been shaped according to the Western culture. So a Western voice is not something we have to reflect on because the whole system represents the Western voice. Liberal democracy is about how to navigate equal power and how to ensure everyone is treated equally. But we cannot talk about equality when the political system doesn't include First Nation voices. All countries have part of history they don't feel proud of it. But it takes courage to face those parts and bring some light. And that is what Australia has been doing since 1967. The voice is about the courage to listen and take action. Es más fácil comunicarse cuando se nos escucha desde nuestra cultura. I'm sure not many of you understand what I said because it was in Spanish, my mother tongue. I just said it's easier to speak up when we can do it from our own culture. And I think that's what the voice is about. The voice is not just a voice. It's the voice of over 250 indigenous language groups and nations across Australia. The voice is about intercultural change of ideas in mutual respect. The voice goes in the right direction to accomplish what Australia agreed upon in the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People about self-determination and addressing systematic exclusion. Professor Tom Calma, on his acceptance speech as Senior Australian of the Year, said Indigenous people have been treated as a problem to be solved. And that's the reason of the poor outcomes of First Nation policies. He also said that a voice is a symbolic way to include all the First Nation in the foundation document of Australia, a way to heal from exclusion and colonization. I agree with him. The voice provides truth about the past, justice about the present, and reconciliation and reparation about the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Edison. Now I'd like to introduce our second speaker this evening, and the first speaker for the No team, Mariam Rakan, who is studying a Diploma of Laws at CDU and is in her second year. Please welcome them to the stage.
Thank you. Good evening, esteemed guests, fellow debaters, and Your Honour, Justice Hiley. Today we gather to discuss one of the most crucial issues in modern Australian politics, the voice to Parliament. The proposal to establish a voice to Parliament for Indigenous Australians has sparked intense debate across our country. My name is Mariam Rakan, and I stand before you as the first speaker of the negative team to present our case. We firmly believe that voting against the current voice to Parliament proposal is the right choice for our nation. My argument will revolve around the potential flaws in the current proposal. Our second speaker, Sharon, will outline the alternatives that we believe are superior and the need for comprehensive solutions that go beyond symbolic gestures. Our third speaker, Peter, will summarize our cases and conclusively rebut the opposing team. Our argument is firmly rooted in the belief that the current voice proposal, rather than addressing the urgent concerns affecting Indigenous Australians, diverts resources and attention away from necessary issues that demand immediate action. I would also like to point out that the Australian federal government has allocated almost $365 million to help deliver the voice to Parliament. Before the 2023 federal budget was announced, $160 million had been put aside for contingency purposes. Additionally, the government then used its budget to provide the project with an extra $364.6 million, bringing the total amount committed to the Voice project to a bit over $524 million. At the beginning of these past few weeks, I was in favor of the Voice, but the more I researched about it, the more I realized I did not fully understand the meaning behind it. We acknowledge that there are pressing issues faced daily by Indigenous communities in Australia, issues such as health disparities, inadequate access to education, unemployment, and so much more. At the beginning, we argue that the proposed voice to Parliament, as it currently stands, does not effectively address these concerns. Instead, it risks becoming a distraction from the real solutions that could make a tangible difference. Our team will underscore the alarming concern surrounding the allocation of a staggering $364.6 million at the moment for a mere inclusion of a solitary section in the Constitution, when that money can be used in effectively fixing these issues discussed previously. A voice to Parliament will be a group of First Nations people that advise the federal government on First Nations issues. Yup, that's basically it. Professor Megan Davies, a Cabo woman and voice advocate, told The Latch. The Voice will not be a third chamber of Parliament. We have addressed this many times since the Turnbull government first made their claim back in 2017. The Voice will advise our government of the day on matters concerning the lives of First Nations people. It will not have any hidden powers or veto abilities. Many people have argued that the Voice is not going to deliver practical outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people for the real and pressing issues they are dealing with on the ground. Therefore, why are we spending $364.6 million when we could be utilizing that money in a beneficial manner where it is 100% accurate that certain issues will be fixed? I would like to draw your attention to the fact that if the Voice is implemented, how much more money will we spend if we have already committed $500 million before we have even started? Moreover, as fellow debaters, let us critically evaluate this allocation and ask ourselves, are we genuinely addressing the immediate needs of Indigenous communities? Are there alternative approaches that offer more effective and sustainable solutions? The current voice proposal not only falls short of addressing the pressing issues faced by all Australians, particularly Indigenous Australians, but also lacks the potential to yield better outcomes. Several factors contribute to the limited efficiency of this proposal in achieving meaningful change. Firstly, the Voice Initiative fails to address the systematic and structural barriers that perpetuate inequalities for Indigenous Australians. While representation is important, a mere advisory body without substantial decision-making power is insufficient to tackle the deep-rooted issues that Indigenous communities encounter. Meaningful action requires comprehensive reforms that address education, healthcare, land rights, and justice systems, among other critical areas. Moreover, the proposed voice system overlooks the significance of a genuine consultation and collaboration with Indigenous communities in order to truly understand and address the unique challenges faced by Indigenous Australians. Their voices must be heard at every stage of decision-making. Without a robust and inclusive participatory process, the proposed voice risks becoming a tokenistic gesture rather than a catalyst for substantial change. Additionally, the lack of binding powers or mechanisms to enforce recommendations hinders the ability of the voice to drive effective policy outcomes. Without the ability to influence legislative processes or hold decision makers accountable, the voice remains limited in its capacity to affect tangible change and address the pressing concerns faced by Indigenous Australians. Please keep this quote by Warren Mundane, a prominent Australian Aboriginal business, political strategist, and advocate for Indigenous affairs in mind. The people who have been pushing this forward have been in charge of Indigenous affairs for the last 50 years. And what improvements have they done? Thank you.
My name is Mark Rivers. I'm a law student here at Charles Darwin University. I'd like to volunteer to join the Yes Crew because they're outnumbered. Now, Australia, it's a fair go, so I'd like to even the score.
On this, let me see if the rules are going to allow it.
Rules aren't going to allow this time, I don't think.
All right. Unfortunately, not this time.
No worry.
But there's an event coming up later in the year.
Okay, can I just say something?
Yep.
Thank you. My name is Mark Rivers. I was born in Fitzroy Crossing. I come from the Kimberleys in Western Australia. Last Friday, I turned 62. I left school at 14, so that was about 40 years ago, 48 years to be exact. I am currently a law student at Charles Darwin. I've done criminal law and legal process. Now, we haven't got the grades yet, but so far in legal process, I got an 80 out of 103 distinctions and a credit.
Well done.
I offer my services for free, but unfortunately, Charles Darwin won't allow me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. And thank you, Mariam. So our next speaker this evening will come back to the yes side and will be Patrick. And Patrick will also be our third speaker for the yes side, but that's to come. Thanks, Patrick.
Sorry, let me just sort everything out here. Good evening, everybody. Let me start by personally thanking Auntie Billawara, who's somewhere else right now, for her warm welcome to country. As a man of Gudanji descent, I'm grateful to be here on Larrakia country. And thank you so much to Edison for your great introduction to our position, advocating for a successful yes vote, establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice to Parliament in full light of historical perspectives and issues. First off, I will be speaking about the cost benefit and economics of the voice proposal. Secondly, I will be speaking about the development of the communities. I'll also rebut some of the claims made by the first no speaker, including in my arguments. I'll start off by asking one simple question to you all. How much are you willing to pay for a better government that is better able to address the issues of First Nations people? How does $4.73 a year for 3 years sound? Budget papers released by the government last month estimated the cost of the referendum and set up the Voice to cost a total of $360.4 million. That is $14.19 for each Australian, and that's over 3 years. The 2022 budget has committed $1.2 billion over 6 years also to help close the gap, including training First Nations health workers and practitioners, vital health infrastructure, making early education more accessible to Indigenous families, immediate assistance and boost for housing and essential services in NT homelands, and 30 community-led justice agreements. Let's take this from another angle as well when we're talking about money. Between 2022 and 2023, Australian governments provided a total of $11.1 billion worth of spending and tax breaks to assist fossil fuel industries. Whether or not we're in favour of fossil fuel industries, that is the figure that we have. Times that by 6, you get a total of $66.6 billion. And that's over 6 years. So the cost of the Voice, along with the already existing assistance to communities over the next 6 years, will be 2.3% of what we spend on fossil fuels. And when talking about money, we must consider the fact that we are a first world country. We are privileged in that position. We have a $2 trillion economy. We are politically stable. We have enough money and enough willpower to do this for our first Australians. Another thing the Voice will do is bring community-led initiatives, such as those relating to justice and health that I've mentioned right now, into the heart of Canberra. Money absolutely needs to be spent on communities, and I'm sure we are all in agreement tonight, as Miriam said. But throwing money at communities by what our governments deem necessary has not been working and will not work. Recent Closing the Gaps reports indicate that levels of incarceration, children being school ready, children out of home care, and suicide rates are continuing to be stagnant, if not worsening. For example, Indigenous people make up 4% of the population, yet 32% of our adult prison population, and 59% in youth detention. A young Indigenous person, or a young Indigenous man specifically, is more likely to be in jail than to attend a university. These are part of the systemic issues that have been part of our country and have been holding us back from the very beginning. We must ensure that money is spent correctly and not wasted. The Voice is a fantastic way for communities to have more input into the way in which our governments support them. After all, the people who live in communities know best how to solve their own problems. Let's start listening to them. Gone is the age where governments will be able to throw away money and dust their hands off and say, job well done. This proposal will do so much to address these issues. And if we're also talking about money, let's talk about the cost benefit of the correct allocation of resources, the correct support and assistance to Indigenous communities. The money that we will make by doing that is insurmountable. To move to what to rebut what my friend on the no side has said regarding the lack of proper action that will come to this, I will speak further about this in my second speech to you tonight. But let me just say the yes side is fully on the side of democracy. What we're not in favour of is a body that will have veto power, as suggested, as a way to support Indigenous people. But I will further be addressing more of these issues in my second speech. For these reasons, we are wholeheartedly in support for an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice to Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Next, we'll move back to the no side, and I'd like to introduce the fourth speaker tonight, second for the no team, Sharon Noor, who is studying a Bachelor of Laws and is in her third year. Please welcome Sharon.
To the Larrakia people, please accept our appreciation for your warm welcome and gracious invitation. May we continue to build bridges, cross divides, and celebrate the unity that in diversity resides. I just want to rebut the last speaker. I mean, in fact, I wondered if he was on our team for a second, but he did say that, and as he pointed out, Australia has strong institutions that actively address Indigenous advantage. For example, the National Congress of Australia's First People advocates for Indigenous rights. Local Aboriginal land councils and native title representatives bodies protect land rights and promote economic development. These institutions have been established through consultation and they are tailored to meet community needs. They ensure Indigenous voices shape policies, addressing unique challenges without added bureaucracy. Legislation like the Aboriginal Land Rights Act, Native Title, the Racial Discrimination Act, empower Indigenous Australians. These laws uphold cultural and land rights. They redress past injustices and foster equality. They amplify Indigenous voices, contributing to reconciliation and justice in Australia. The voice to Parliament runs the risk of being merely a symbolic gesture that soothes our colonial guilt. I noticed we talked about that and I thought that was interesting too. And I'm white, right? I mean, it's fairly obvious. I look white and I sound very white. And I know after Kevin Rudd apologised, I went to bed that night just feeling so much better. I know that the easy way for us white mob is to just say yes and go home at night after the vote and think we've done enough. Because that's what we did in 1967. That's what we've done after the apology. That's what we've done since the Uluru Statement from the Heart. We do nothing. Do not let us get away with it again. That's all I'll say. Moving on, Australia is the only Commonwealth nation without a treaty with its First People. Furthermore, the fact that Indigenous Australians have never ceded sovereignty over their lands and territories forms a compelling argument in favour of the no vote. Indigenous communities have maintained their inherent rights to self-determination and decision-making, demonstrating their capacity to govern themselves without the need for an additional national level structure. By acknowledging Indigenous sovereignty and advocating for treaty, we validate their autonomy, honour their cultural and spiritual bond with the land, and propel genuine collaboration and self-governance. Voting no on the Voice proposal affirms our commitment to empowering Indigenous communities within the existing framework, amplifying their voices and paving the way for a future where their integral role in shaping our nation is celebrated. Let us heed the call of the Barunga Statement and forge a path towards reconciliation, justice and true partnership through treaty. While the Voice to Parliament's intention is commendable, we must address concerns about its effectiveness, representation and unintended consequences. Let us refrain from rushing into a flawed system without due consideration, as doing so risks exacerbating divisions and impeding progress on reconciliation. Instead, we must strive for a comprehensive and inclusive framework that grants Indigenous Australians sovereignty through treaty while fostering a sense of inclusion and value for all Australians. The 1967 referendum is a reminder the need for careful consideration. Despite its aims, inadequate implementation, limited progress on critical issues such as land rights and self-determination. How long did Mabo take? It was 25 years. Do you really think Indigenous people can wait another 25 years for substantial change? So, I have just one thing left to say. In the realm of progress, let us dare tread, where truth's voice needs no appeasing thread. No superficial gestures, no empty displays, but a symphony of change guiding our way. Superficial acts may momentarily appease, but true empowerment our aim should seize. For it is not our role to dictate or sway, but to uplift and support in a respectful way. In this journey of progress, we chart our course with comprehensive approaches we endorse, united in our stance against the proposed voice, advocating for treaty, the people's choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Now I'd like to welcome to the stage someone who needs no further introduction, Patrick.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Edison, and of course, Patrick, for your insightful points, proving the need for the voice and the cost benefits involved. I would now like to acknowledge and speak about the concept of reconciliation and the journey this referendum will take us on, as well as the processes of decision-making. I will also refute the arguments put forward by our friends on the no side, such as relating to treaty and for reconciliation throughout my speech. Movements for Indigenous rights have been going on for hundreds of years, from the early resistance movements starting in 1788 to where we are now. The voice is just one step on this journey. The voice is not an endpoint, and it does not damage the reconciliation journey whatsoever. Proper reconciliation is saying the words that need to be said, but also backing these words with action. That is what the yes side would like to see. Everyone in this country wants to see reconciliation, and it's great to see that both the no side and the yes side tonight are on that side of reconciliation. But we cannot move forward as a harmonious society when this has not happened. We cannot just say sorry and move on from the past. While this may be easy for some, it is near impossible for those who have lived and continue to live with the impacts of colonialism. It is not about being divisive. It is about recognising Australia's first people in the Constitution and backing that up with a meaningful and impactful voice on the issues that affect them. This is an essential part of the reconciliation journey. Let's just picture this for a moment. Imagine waking up the day after the referendum, celebrations in the streets, with Aboriginal people knowing in their hearts that they will at least have a guaranteed voice on the decisions that are made that are affecting them. Then let's imagine the other alternative. Waking up election day, defeated, sad, quiet. Seeing the Pauline Hansons and the Lydia Thorpes of this country delighting in yet another no to the voices of Aboriginal people. I firmly believe that the former is a better way of achieving reconciliation. The voice is not the endpoint to the journey as well. It will serve as a powerful negotiating body for a much needed treaty, which is what we all want to see. After all, the consensus of the Uluru Statement did not just mention the voice. And this Uluru Statement came from countless consultations in every single state and territory of this country, with thousands of Indigenous voices taking part. That statement asked for a voice, treaty, and truth. We can do all three. It will be yet another step to acknowledging the thousands of years of sovereignty and self-determination. It will be yet another step to acknowledging the thousands of years of sovereignty and self-determination, and this will shine through our Constitution as a new and appropriate expression of our cultural heritage and nationhood. While, of course, some in the Indigenous community undoubtedly see this movement as something that takes away from their sovereignty, this is an opinion that every Indigenous person has a right to take. Let me be very clear. Aboriginal sovereignty existed for thousands of years before the British arrived. Aboriginal sovereignty has existed throughout the colonial period, and Aboriginal sovereignty will continue with or without the voice. What the voice is about is traditional owners taking their rightful place as a co-equal part of our governance. It's about making sure that we are heard in Canberra and that decisions made there reflect our wishes. This will make our sovereignty shine and will serve as yet another value step in the reconciliation journey. Not only will the voice mark a milestone of reconciliation, but it will be a powerful anchor for our communities to have direct access to governments, improving the decision-making process and strengthening our democracy. From the very outset of this nation, Indigenous people have been intentionally marginalised and excluded from our political system. Of course, they were not considered in the founding of our national government and constitution, and the voices of Indigenous people have almost always been ignored. Our Australian democracy has served the general public well, but has historically not served our Indigenous people nearly as well as it should. 84.5% of our First Nations people are enrolled to vote in our elections. This is compared to 97% of their non-Indigenous counterparts. There has never been an Aboriginal Prime Minister. The first Aboriginal MP was elected in 2010, roughly 220 years after the First Fleet and 109 years after the formation of Parliament. Prescribing a First Nations body whose job it is to make representations to government and Parliament will only open new channels of communication and information, in addition to the ones that are already there. It will be accountable to the same process any other governmental organisation is, but most importantly, it will be accountable to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We firmly believe that the voice is one of the steps that we need to take. It will enact meaningful change. The yes side is supported by upwards of 80% of Aboriginal people polled. It's supported by the legal communities, land councils, sports organisations, psychologists, grassroots movements. The voice will not be perfect the first time, but one of the fantastic benefits of including it in the Constitution is that it provides a new sense of stability to the Indigenous voice. So we can improve and not removed. So we can improve it, but not remove it. In 1967, we were counted. In 2023, we seek to be heard. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. I would now like to introduce our final speaker for this evening. Is also a speaker for the no side, Peter Susanto, who's studying a Bachelor of Clinical Sciences and is in his second year at CDU.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and Justice Hiley. My name is Peter, as has been introduced, and I'm a 16-year-old student currently in the Northern Territory Medical Program. Within my speech, I will first rebut some of the claims that have been made by our opposition on the foresight for thoroughly supporting and backing up the arguments, the strong arguments that we have procured on our against side. One of the first things that I would strongly like to dispute is a claim made by the third speaker of the yes side. That is that current governments have been throwing money at Indigenous people and at Aboriginal people in an attempt to fix their issues, and that has done nothing. Well, we strongly disagree with that, especially the wordings behind that, because looking at the data and considering inflation, which I'm sure affects the hip pocket of every single person within this auditorium, although there have been many claims by governments that they are adding funding to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, if you look behind the scenes closely, that is always associated with a defunding, often larger. And so there's been a net defunding of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, which seems to be on track to continue, especially if the voice continues and is implemented, as it will be considered as just another part of the budget. And so this money, $364.3 million, which is not insignificant, that will be taken out from the budget for our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And that goes on to another one of the claims I would like to dispute that has also been made by the second speaker of the yes side. And that is the fact that he has attempted to manipulate your emotions and attempted to manipulate your sense of hip pocket by claiming the cost benefit of the voice, which is apparently only 14.19 cents per person. But if you consider taxpayers and the fact that this will disproportionately affect people of low socioeconomic status, including and especially our Indigenous people, that increases to hundreds of dollars per taxpayer. How would you feel about not only paying that, but who here actually has $500 million to spend in their pocket right now? Hopefully you do, Professor Fleming. So those were some of the claims I wanted to dispute. And finally, addressing the first speaker of the yes side, we would like to say that a voice is not a panacea to all the problems of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And it is not required. I know this from my stance as a person who's going into the medical field. It is not required to have an effective health awareness campaign. What we really need is empathy, and we need a sense of community between people of all races within Australia in order to help the older people and even the younger people of each and every community in Australia to understand what is required to take care of their health. And so I will now continue to provide some more points that back up the statements that we are arguing on the no side. First of all, we are questioning, as this voice is constitutionally mandated to exist, there must be people sitting on it regardless of how they get there. Now, the question is, how much do they get paid? If the voice doesn't have to be listened to by the executive, by the government, then what is stopping the voice from becoming just a great retirement gig for the likes of Linda Burney and Noel Pearson, where they get paid 6 figures but don't actually have to do anything? These people are bureaucrats who have done nothing over the past 20 years and will continue to do nothing to support the people on the ground, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in our communities. Furthermore, if the voice is required because our constitution and system of government do not represent Indigenous people well enough, then doesn't that say more about the entire system and less about the need for a voice? Rather than adding footnotes to a document that was written by people who barely acknowledge the document itself, shouldn't we be talking about legislating it first, having it operational for a while, and demonstrating that it really works, as has been claimed by the yes side? They also talk about fossil fuel subsidies, and we would like to say the fact that these are required right now, and they're also organized with the intention of phasing out fossil fuels and transferring to renewables. However, the fact is, it's irrefutable that currently we are reliant on fossil fuels, and removing them in a click of the fingers will have major economic ramifications and exacerbate the cost of living crisis that affects all of us, but especially our Indigenous people. So what we are proposing, once again, I will reiterate, we are proposing better alternatives to a voice rather than a constitutional amendment, including state-based ones that, as Sharon, our second speaker, explained, already exist and should really be utilized even better. A legislation of a voice, like I said, and especially directly ceding control back to each community to provide them with what they really need, self-determination. For example, before a controversial and confusing change by the Northern Territory government in 2008, there were 51 Aboriginal community councils in the territory plus Jabiru that were uniquely catered to each organized community. And many Aboriginal people in the relevant areas felt that this provided them with equal rights as other Australians and a platform to enact positive change in their communities. However, that was eliminated by the government that is currently supporting the voice to ostensibly save money. But really, we all know that it's to increase their control, their iron grip over the communities. And that this was against the people's wishes. And so, in conclusion, we, the no side, believe that to have the best outcomes for our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, it is extremely important that we go against the current government's proposal for a voice, this election ploy by them in order to implement a voice. I can bring up the statistic that $10.5 million is going to be provided to the Department of Health and Aged Care in order to increase mental health support for Indigenous people during the Voice campaign. The question is, why didn't the current federal government implement that at the very start then? Why only when it's currently in the media and will be a very good advertisement for them in the upcoming election? So to sum it all up, the yes side has said and acknowledged that there are 200 plus languages and hundreds of different groups of Indigenous people who would want to be represented with the voice. However, I would like to bring light to the fact that the current voice proposal only includes seats for 24 people, just 24 people, 2 from each state and territory, plus the Torres Strait Islands. And apart from that, a few seats for people in remote areas, Indigenous people in remote areas. Let me ask you, how is it possible that only 24 people can represent the true plurality of Indigenous people throughout Australia? In doing this, the current proposal appears to be doing the exact opposite of what it wants to be and refusing millions of Indigenous people their own voice and providing a platform through which possibly rampant corruption can occur as well. And so the government currently, through this voice proposal, is treating Indigenous people like they are one unitary group with all identical views. And as we know, that is 100% not true. And hence, we must go against the current voice that is being proposed, go show to the government, the current federal government, that we do not accept their ploy to gain more votes and to really refute the voices of thousands or millions of Indigenous people around Australia, and that we as a nation are united in achieving our goal of both reconciliation and also unification of our nation. So our final plea to all of you who are of voting age and will be voting in this referendum is to please vote no. Vote with your head over your heart and vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So that's quite a lot for us to absorb this evening. A fair bit of food for thought. I'll now turn back to you, the audience, to return to the Slido question and to place your vote again. Were you swayed? Were you convinced one way or the other? We'll ask you to vote a second time. Please remember that our judge will consider the results of the poll as part of the judgment this evening. So the question on the screen, do you approve the proposed alteration of the Constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice to Parliament? Are you yes, no, or undecided? As you do that, I'll also ask our judge to now reflect on his decision. But while he is doing that, let me give you a quick recap of tonight's debate as I saw it. So we started with Edison, who spoke to us about colonialism and setting the scene, but how colonialists used the word "but" to absolve the West from actions in history. He asked us to consider why is the question of a Western voice not asked? And he told us that that's because of system imbalance. Patrick spoke to us about the relatively small cost of the voice over a number of years, that it will be a very low cost for the referendum and to implement versus such things including fuel subsidies. He said that money needs to be spent. And he also reminded us of the incarceration rates, which truly are appalling for Aboriginal males. Patrick, in his role as third speaker, reminded us of the Indigenous rights movements and those activists that have come before us, and how they reminded us that action is needed in order for us to continue on a reconciliation journey. He spoke about the Uluru Statement from the Heart, asking us to consider voice, treaty, truth, and that anything but would not be co-equal. Patrick also, I think maybe if he, not sure, but maybe he's a constitutionalist because he told us that our constitution provides our country stability. But on the no side, Miriam also, funnily enough, spoke about costs, how some people don't fully understand what the voice is, and that no practical outcomes could justify the cost of what's being proposed. Sharon spoke about the strength of our already existing institutions. She spoke about ALRA, or the Aboriginal Land Rights Act, and how that has been an instrument for improving the lives of Aboriginal people and giving them power and choice over their land. She told us that a treaty would be a better way to go, because otherwise all we're doing is indulging in a symbolic gesture to cure white guilt. The closing speaker for the no side, Peter, also focused on the costs to the taxpayer. He was really pulling on our heartstrings given the rate of inflation at the moment. I liked how he tied tax with empathy, two concepts I haven't really ever thought of tying together myself. Not sure if it was a wise move, but he also pointed the finger at bureaucrats. As a bureaucrat, I wasn't sure if I should run or hide. 24 people versus millions was a question that Peter asked us. 24 people representing the voice to Parliament versus all of those Indigenous First Nations people that won't have a direct voice. So there are some of the highlights from this evening's discussion. Hope everyone now has had time to vote. I would now like to invite Acting Justice Hiley to the stage to deliver his verdict. Please make him welcome.
Thank you, David, and thank you everybody for inviting me along. We've all had many discussions about this topic, and I've certainly been helped by this further discussion this evening. I think we can keep discussing it forever and ever, and maybe still have questions to ask. In any event, I basically approached this by, in the traditional manner of judging debates. That is, firstly, looking at the way in which the speakers respected each other and the issues, and adopted professionalism. And I gave them all full marks for that because they all spoke very respectfully. The second criteria was probably one of the main ones. That's what we call content. And for that, I looked at the quality of the content, its relevance, and whether it was well researched and supported by evidence. I was pleased to hear some of the speakers actually talk about the existing structures, such as those that exist, particularly in the Northern Territory, of course, where we all are, under the Aboriginal Land Rights Act, which operates over half of the Northern Territory, as you know. And some of the speakers also spoke about existing structures under the Native Title Act, which of course operates throughout Australia, at least on native title land, which is about half of Australia. So the rep bodies and the prescribed body corporates and all those sorts of things. And also, I was also looking out for other references to existing voices, so to speak. And one of the speakers in the negative referred to the fact apparently that we did have 51 community councils in the Northern Territory, each of which I gathered perform very valuable roles. And of course, not for me to say, but as we know, they were sort of all combined, I think, into 2 or 3, which may not have been a good thing. In any event, in terms of content, I did give a number of more points to the negative side than the affirmative side, because I thought that the affirmative were lacking in terms of addressing existing structures and, more importantly, addressing how the voice could achieve whatever they can't achieve. So that was the content side. On the delivery, I ended up being more persuaded by the negative side in terms of their delivery. I thought the way that the arguments were structured, clear topics, we were told at the start what the topics would be, and they were developed. The fourth criterion is rebuttal, that is to identify the arguments that had been put by the opposition and then answering those arguments. And I was looking for some answers to the points that were made by the second speaker, in particular for the negative, but that is as to what it is that the voice might do that the existing institutions are not able to do. So I felt that on the rebuttal side, there wasn't much there from the affirmative side. And again, I gave more points to the negative. In terms, the final criterion is teamwork. And I felt that, well, certainly the second and third speakers for the affirmative certainly spoke with one voice. And together with the first speaker, yes, performed very well. But the negatives, of course, I thought also did well on the teamwork. So all in all, from a purely debating point of view, I find for the negative. I have also been handed the Slido results. Am I allowed to announce those, Graham? Yeah. Okay. Which I've found interesting. So the pre-poll results had 72% answering yes, and 18% no, and undecided 11%. That doesn't add up, does it? Anyway, all right. I guess that's out of 101. So that was the pre-poll. So the post-poll, the yes went down to 47%, the no went up to 34%, and undecided 19%. So again, that doesn't add up to 100, but whatever it is, clearly the debaters for the negative obviously persuaded a lot of people to change their minds, and also interestingly resulted in 19 people, 90% of being undecided, as distinct from 11 who were previously undecided. So where does that leave us? Maybe we're more confused than ever. But so I'm sorry, I always have to say to people when I'm on the bench, somebody will always be unhappy about what I decide and others will be happy. But I'd like to congratulate all of the speakers for doing a very good job.
Thank you, Your Honour. And just to remind everyone that the debaters this evening are first-time debaters, so it's even more impressive given the quality of the debate this evening. I want to congratulate all of the debaters tonight. It is no easy feat preparing arguments, especially in front of a judge. I remember my first court appearance and yeah, you did a lot better than I did. I thank everyone this evening for joining us, including those people online. Hopefully you agree with me that our debaters have done CDU very proud as well. A thank you to the members of staff from the law discipline who worked with the debaters this evening. Guziel Hill and Elizabeth Spencer, who work in the Faculty of Arts and Society, for their efforts in mentoring our students through the debating process over the last few weeks. Their guidance and generosity, as well as their time, has been very valuable, as you can see. I also want to thank our First Nations Leadership Voice project team for organising this, the second event, as part of an ongoing series, and developing a program which will follow this evening. The program of events will keep us informed and will provide a platform for important discussions to occur. The next event in this series will be the Voice to Parliament discussion panel on the 14th of September. Please keep an eye out for details online and do join us again. For more information on The Voice, you can join us at the Northern Institute here at CDU during NAIDOC Week for a seminar given by Georgie Corrie to discuss how we can honour elders at the upcoming referendum. That will be at 10 a.m. on Thursday, the 6th of July. Once again, please thank all of our speakers today for what has been an interesting and well-informed debate. Our special guest judge, Acting Justice Hiley, for his thoughtful adjudication, and all of our audience, both here in the auditorium and online. Thank you.